Hello and welcome back. Now, before proceeding further in this section, I want to add a new functionality in our Express application to show different error messages for the same error in development environment and in production environment. So what I want is, for the same error, I want to show a different error message to the real users in the production environment, and I want to show a different error message with more information about the error in development environment to the developers. So showing different error messages in production and development environment is a key part of building secure, user-friendly and maintainable Express applications. In development, we might want to show the detailed error information to the developers to help debug issue quickly. And in development, we might want to include the stack trace of the error, if there is any internal error message, or if there is any file or line number where the error has occurred. So these are the information we might want in error in order to debug the error and fix the issue quickly in development environment. But in production environment, the application is going to be used by the real users. So we might want to hide any sensitive detail which an error can contain from the real users. And we also want to show a friendly error message to the user without giving too much detail to the user. For example, we can show a message like something went wrong or unable to process your request. So these are some friendly messages which we can show to the end user in case if the application is not working properly. So in development, we want to show detailed error message to the developers, but in production, we want to show a friendly error message to the end users. Now currently what we are doing is, if I go to VS Code and let me close this hotel.js file and let's go to this errorController.js where we have created our global error handling middleware. So from here, we are sending the same response to the client, no matter whether we are in the production environment or in the development environment. But our intention should be to leak as little information about the error as possible in the production environment, which will be used by the real users. So for the real users in the production environment, we want to send a nice and short error message to the user so that the user will know that some error has happened and he needs to rectify the error. There, we do not want to send stack trace of the error or a cryptic error message which the end user will not understand. Also, we want to leak as little information in the production to avoid any misuse of that information to secure our application from hackers or other users with malicious intent. But on the other hand, when we are in the development, we want to get as much information about the error that has occurred as possible for the developers. Because in the development environment, the application will be mainly used by the developers. So we need to get as much information about the error as possible because it will help developers debug and find the problem and fix it. So in simple words, we want to send different error responses for different environments. In the development environment, we want to send as much information about the error as possible. But in case of production environment, we want to send as little information about the error as possible. And to achieve that, inside this global error handling middleware function, we are going to add some if-else block. So here, what I'm going to do is, after we have created this status code variable and this status variable, after that, I'm going to write an if-else statement. So this is going to be my if statement. Inside that, I'm going to check if the environment is development. And for that, if you remember, when we were talking about environment variables, we learned that in order to read the value of an environment variable, we can access this process object. So in order to use this process object, we do not need to require it in this file. It is globally available everywhere in the Node.js application. On that, we have a variable called env. And in that env variable, we will have node underscore env environment variable. So if it is equal to development, in that case, I want to send this response. So I'll cut it from here and I'll paste it here. Okay. And in the response, along with the status and message, I want to have the stack trace. So for that, I'll say stack trace, and to this stack trace from the error object, we are going to read the stack trace. Okay, so we are reading this stack trace from the error object and we are assigning to this stack trace property of this JSON object, which we are sending in the response. And then along with this, we also want to send the original error object. So apart from these properties, there might be some other information in the error object which can be useful for the developer to debug and fix the issue. So we are also going to send the original error object in the response. Okay, so here I'm also creating an error property and assigning it with the error which has occurred. So this response we want to send when we are in the development environment. But when we are not in the development environment, in that case, we will be in production environment. Remember that here I'm only talking about two environments, development and production. If you also want to add one more environment, let's say staging, and in the staging environment, if you want to send a completely different error response, then for that also you can add another if condition. But here I'm only going to consider development and production environment. So in production environment, again, I want to send the same type of response. Okay, but in that response, I'm not going to send the error object and the stack trace. I'm going to send the status and the message. Okay, and this is it. So when our application is running in development environment, for the error response, we are sending this much of the information. But if the application is running in production environment, then we are only sending the status and the message for the error. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to refactor this code a little bit. So for that, I'm going to create two functions. I'll create devErrors function. Okay, and inside this, I'm going to cut this logic and I'm going to paste it here. Okay, now here inside this function, we want to use the status code and we want to use the error variable, the error object. So to this function, we are going to pass the status code and the error object. Okay, and here for the status, we can get it from error.status. So now I'm going to call this devErrors from within this if block. And here I'm going to pass the status code and the error object. All right, in the same way, I'm also going to create another function. I'll call it as prodErrors. Here also, I'm going to use this error function syntax. And this function also is going to take the status code actually, and the error object. And inside that, from within that function, I'm going to send this response. So I'll cut it from here and let's paste it here. All right. And here also, we can get the status from error object. So I'll say error.status. And finally, let's call this prodErrors function from within this else block. And to that, we need to pass the status code and we need to pass the error object. Let's save the changes. So here I have just refactored this global error handling middleware. Now let's quickly test this global error handling middleware. So let's go to Postman. And currently our application is running in development environment. So let's say I want to update a hotel document and there I want to set the price of a hotel. First of all, with this hotel, we will not have a document. So if I maybe send this request, let's see what we get in the response. Here we have a 500 internal server error and it says response is not defined. Let's see. Okay, here to these functions, we also need to pass the response object because using that, it is going to send the response, right? And here, actually, I don't need the status code parameter also because I can read the status code from the error object directly. So I can say error.status code because the error object which we are going to create, that will also have a status code property. Same thing here I can do. So I can read the status code from the error object, right? So here I don't need the status code parameter. Instead, I'll pass the response parameter. Okay. And when we are calling these functions, there instead of passing status code, we are going to pass the response object. All right. Let's save the changes. Let's go back to Postman one more time and let's try it one more time. And now you see we have 404 not found response. And in the response, you will see we have status as fail, we have message as the hotel with given ID is not found, and we also have the error object. And in this error object, we have the status code, status, and here you will see that is operational is true. And here we have this is operational property because inside the update route handler function, even in other route handler function also, when we are creating this app error object, inside this app error class, we are setting is operational property to true. And now we are also going to use this is operational property of the error object. So let's go to VS Code and let's go to errorController.js. So here, what we want to do is we want to check if the error is an operational error. So for that, I'm going to use this is operational property. Okay, so if the error is an operational error, in that case, we are going to send this error response. I'll cut it from here and I'll paste it here. So here, if the error is an operational error, we are going to send this response. Otherwise, if the error is not operational error, if it is some programming error, so let's say the error has occurred because of some bugs, or currently when we are getting an error from Mongoose, that error is also not set as operational error. So whenever a validation error occurs, that error is thrown by Mongoose. And for those errors also, we have not set this is operational property. Only the errors which we are creating manually using our app error class, there we are setting this is operational property. Currently in our application, all other errors will be treated as non-operational errors. So here what we want is, if the error is operational error, then only we want to send the actual error message to the client in the production environment. But if the error is not an operational error, if the error has occurred because of some bug in the application, then we don't want to send the information about that bug to the end user, right? So in that case, I want to send a completely different response. And there I'm going to set the status as error, which will tell that some error has occurred in the application. And as the message, I'm going to hard code it as something went wrong. Please try again later. Okay, so this type of response I want to send to the client in the production environment if the error has occurred due to some bug in our application. Now, currently, if we have Mongoose errors also, for those errors also, this response will be sent in the production environment. Because currently for the Mongoose errors, we have not set is operational to true. Only those errors which we are creating manually, for those only this is operational is true. But in our coming lectures, when we are going to handle validation errors in our Express application or some other Mongoose errors, there for those errors also we are going to set is operational to true. So that whenever a validation error happens or some other Mongoose error happens, in that case, the actual error message is sent to the client in the production environment. Only when there is some bug in our application and because of that the error has occurred, for those errors, we want to send error message something like this. And with this, let's save the changes. Remember that currently our application is running in development environment and currently only those errors will be considered as is operational, which we are creating manually. So currently we cannot test this implementation. We will test it in our next lecture when we will handle some Mongoose errors. But for now, I just want to see that everything is working as expected in the development environment. So again, if I send this request, I should get the same response. So here you see, we are getting the same response. Now let me try one more thing. So let's go to VS Code and let's go to our config.env file. And there, let me change this to production. Let's save the changes. Let's go to terminal and here I will stop this process by pressing Ctrl C and I'll start this process again. Okay, so our application is now running and connection to DB is successful. Remember that when this application was started, it would have read all the environment variables from config.env file and there it would have set this node_env environment variable to production. So now if I go to Postman, this time we should get production error. That means we should only get the status and the message of the error. We should not get the actual error object. Let's see if that's the case. So if I send this request, you see in the production environment, we are only getting the status and message in the error response, and we are not getting the actual error object. All right, so this is all I wanted to cover in this lecture. From the next lecture, we are going to handle some Mongoose error in our application. If you have any questions from this lecture, then feel free to ask it. Thank you for listening and have a great day.